Alright, what's up, YouTube audience? It's been a minute. It's been a damn minute. I'm in Virginia right now, as you can tell by the Buc-ee's hat, even though I guess usually it's in Texas, but hey, fuck it. I'm just going on here to put out a little bit of news on MMA events and all that stuff. Jon Jones wanting to be released from the UFC after basically being lied to and lied from, aka karma from him pulling out to the Tom Aspinall fight. Islam pulling out, technically, of what seemed to be negotiations of a fight. And then also with that, Ilya Topuria putting out a Twitter post saying basically Justin Gaethje will pay for the faults of Islam Makhachev. And that's where Ali Abdelaziz pulled out all of his stops on Islam's account. And we're going to be talking about that. So, first things first. Jon Jones wants to be released from the UFC after a couple of Dana White press conferences where journalists were asking questions about Jon Jones possibly being on the white card, what's going on with that, and Dana basically replied with, he's not going to be on there, he's basically retired, talking about him having arthritis in his hips, not being able to fight and all that stuff. And I find that kind of weird considering the fact that Kamaru Usman, one of the top contenders in the welterweight division, has bad knees, has said on the Joe Rogan podcast specifically that he has bad knees, that he has to walk backwards downstairs. So Jon Jones obviously didn't take a liking to that, went on a little bit of a Twitter raid where he then, I believe, deleted most of the posts, basically just saying, I never said that. I'm perfectly healthy. I was getting stem cell treatment to get ready for it. And basically just demanding to be released from the UFC, which I will say, thank God. The sooner they get Jon Jones out of the UFC, I feel the better the company will be. And with that, I think that Dana, it's a little bit of a complicated situation because Dana White, I feel, is truthful in saying that, you know, Jon Jones should not be headlining a card. He's a bit of a liability. There have been times where they've moved entire events because the state athletic commission just would not allow him to compete in there. And I feel like they've done too many favors for him over the past few years to where now it's a little bit of karma. With him pulling out of the Tom Aspinall fight, with him basically getting a negotiated contract for that fight and then turning it down last second. And with the announcement of Ciryl Gane versus Alex Pereira for the White House card, there are a couple of things that make me wonder maybe they were in negotiations for it. They lowballed Jon Jones, who just turned it down thinking it was a joke, and then that's when they announced the fight. So with that, I feel as though they should release Jon Jones, see where he goes up, see where he ends up. Maybe he goes with MVP promotions. Maybe he fights Francis Ngannou. I would hate for that, but hey, there's either that or the PFL, bud. In other news, Islam and Ilya Topuria have been going back and forth over the past few days. Basically about the main event of the White House card. For those of you that don't know, Justin Gaethje and Ilya Topuria are going to be headlining the White House card for the lightweight title, which comes as a shock to most people because a lot of people thought that it was going to be more of a high-profile fight. Something like Ilya Topuria going up to welterweight to fight Islam for a triple crown, trying to get the featherweight, the lightweight, and the welterweight title. But it turns out, instead of that, we're just getting the unification bout between the interim champion and the actual champion of the lightweight division, which I'm perfectly fine with. I think that that's a banger of a fight. I think that it's going to go full 5 rounds and it's going to be non-stop action. The only thing is news had came out between Islam and Topuria, both going back and forth about possible negotiations about the fight, and Islam pulling out due to a hand injury. Now, that's where the interesting part comes in, where there have been no accounts of him having the said injury during training camp, during any part of the past 4 or 5 months. It has been a lingering injury for him, but he has not got surgery in order to fix that. So basically, Ilya Taporia called out Islam, just saying, you backed out of the fight, but that's all right. Justin Gaethje's going to pay for the disrespect that you have caused. And Islam, aka Ali Abdelaziz, Islam's manager, then went on Twitter on Islam's behalf on his account saying, we were in talks and we know who chickened out, which kind of makes a little bit of a weird sense. I don't remember what the tweet said specifically, but it was just the cowardice of this is just very hypocrisy. And also, I guess you could kind of tell it was Ali Abdelaziz because at the end of the tweet started talking about how, like, I didn't even know that I was a bitch type of thing. So, I mean, we all know that Ali Abdelaziz is in charge of most of the social media landscape of both Islam, Khabib, most of the fighters. And I do feel as though, first and foremost, I got to pray for Justin Gaethje. That's going to be a tough fight now. Because you got to think Ilya Taporia knocking out people in the featherweight division, then climbing up to the lightweight division, knocks out Charles Oliveira in the first round, who, although having a glass chin, has never really been knocked cold out like that. And then recently he had a bit of internal struggles, bit of family struggles, came out of that, and now he's going straight into the fight with Justin Gaethje, the highlight, and I feel like it's going to be an amazing fight. Although I will say the prowess of Topuria possibly getting 3 title belts is very alluring. We also do have to think about the entertainment factor of that. It would be a little bit too much of a grappling fest. I would almost say it'd be almost how Max Holloway versus Charles Oliveira was. Nobody really liked that main event. It was a bunch of grappling, bunch of top game, a little bit of ground and pound, but not really any submissions. And I feel like Islam would do that if he was at the 170-pound division. Because it's not like the lower weight classes where it's 10 pounds, 10 pounds, 10 pounds. This is 15 pounds we're talking about. 155 to 170. And then you got to think, Islam is probably used to that 170 weight. So usually with fighters, they want to get bulked up on the off season so that they can cut during training camp, so that then they can bulk back up during fight day after they weigh in. So usually, like, a popular example of this is Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson used to be in the lightweight division, but his walk-around weight was around 190 to 200 pounds. During the training camp, he would lose all that weight, and then as soon as he would weigh in, he would then rehydrate himself. Now, with Islam, he had a tough time making the weight cut down to 155, possibly because his walk-around weight was around 185, 190. With him going up into the welterweight division, he's now going to have a higher weight differential. Like, I'd say he'd probably walk around 200, 210. Ilya Taporia probably walks around 185, 190 on the off season. So him to go up to 170, only cutting 20 pounds, he will be fresh. He will be a good fighter. I just don't think that he would be ready for Islam's pressure, especially on the ground. And then we also got to think, Makhachev does have somewhat decent striking. So I would say either way, Ilya is going to be winning the main event, whether it's Justin Gaethje or whether it's Islam, because I can see Ilya Taporia smoking him out in the early rounds. And I can see the pressure of having a White House card waning on Islam Makhachev, especially after Ramadan. So, I mean, those are kind of my thoughts on the whole decisions that they've been making on the White House card. I feel as though the entirety of the card is subpar to what we expected and what we wanted out of the White House card. So, I mean, let's go down the card real quick. We got, I'm literally just naming it off the top of my head, Justin Gaethje, Ilya Taporia. If I had to grade that, I'd say that's an A-. An A+ technically for the allure of the card would have been Islam Taporia. If you wanted like an A+ in terms of talent, probably Alex Pereira, Tom Aspinall, but Tom Aspinall's got that eye surgery. He's not going to be ready. Then we go into the co-main, Ciryl Gane versus Alex Pereira for the interim title. Once again, I'd say that's a B+. It's not exactly an A because it's not for the world championship. But we also have to realize that there are different circumstances than usual to where now there has to be an interim title for that division. Then we go, I think, down one more to Mauricio Huffy and Michael Chandler, which I'd say is a B minus. Because like Mauricio Huffy is a very good prospect and Michael Chandler is a very explosive fighter. But we also have to realize Michael Chandler's on the downgrade of his career, and he's also 39, I think, 38, 39. Mauricio Huffy's like 29, 30. He's in the prime of his career. So, I mean, it's definitely not going to be good for the Americans on that, but it would be a good fight. Then we have, I think, what was it? Bo Nickel versus Kyle Dawkins, which, I mean, is just a good American fight. Once again, Bo Nickel shouldn't be on a main card. I feel like he should never be on a main card until he wins 2 more fights in a row up against, like, top 20 talent. But for him going up against Kyle Dawkins coming off a 4 or 5 fight win streak, very imposing fighter. I feel like that's a good fight, but if I had to grade that, it would be definitely a C plus on that. It doesn't have the allure that any of the other fights have, but it also doesn't have even the technical prowess that any of the other fights would have. And I think the last one that they had was Steve Garcia versus Diego Lopez, which that is going to be a banger of a fight. Steve Garcia weighing in at 145, 6 feet. 6 feet tall, weighing in at 145. I think has a 6 or 7 inch reach advantage over Diego Lopez, but Diego Lopez does have the experience of not only going 5 rounds, being in a championship fight, being in a main event. I think he's going to get used to the pressure that the White House card brings, especially with there only being 6 fights. And so I feel like that deserves a higher grade than even Bo Nickel, even Michael Chandler. I think that should have been the 3rd fight on the card rather than the 1st fight. But anyways, if I had to give the whole card, I'd say like a B plus. We're not really getting anything we want ever since the Paramount deal started. They've kind of just been releasing fights that 1, they can make, 2, they should make, and 3, fun fights, which I'm fine with. But at the same time, with something that has a prowess of a White House card, 250 years of freedom, quote unquote Donald Trump's birthday, you got to pull out all the stops on something like this. It's the same thing as the UFC Sphere card. It's the same thing as UFC 300. They were giving out huge demands saying that there were going to be box office numbers. They spent over $20 million on just the production alone on the UFC Sphere. UFC 300 was marked up as one of the best cards ever. Whereas when we found out about it, we found out that the Vegas Sphere was going to be Merab versus Sean. There weren't really going to be any Mexican talent other than Diego Lopez and Yair Rodriguez. And the rest of them were just kind of fun fights that you could see here and there. And although UFC 300 did have the prowess of having 2 former champions in the beginning of the card, there was not really anything after that up until the main card that made you actually want to sit in your seat. Because with UFC 300, we were expecting, top contenders top to bottom. Dana White even said you would see 2 former champions in the first fight, where we saw Deiveson Figueiredo versus Cody Garbrandt, which was a great fight. But then the next fight you had Bobby Green versus Jim Miller. Then you had Jalen Turner versus Renato Moicano. Like, it was not stacked to the point that Dana White was saying. And now that we're in the Paramount era where they already have the money stacked up and they don't need to spend, they don't have the pressure to build the company anymore. They're now just going to put on fights that they feel they should, rather than the ones that the fans want to see. So it's going to be interesting. I think the first quarter of the Paramount card, or the Paramount era, has kind of been a little lackluster. We hope that the summer, especially International Fight Week, coming in the middle of July, is going to kick things off into quarter 2. But it doesn't seem like it's going to be like that, especially with the fighters that are currently available. Because if you think about it, most champions are going to be fighting in the next 2 to 3 months. And then the other champions, you don't exactly want to be on a pay-per-view main event. You know what I mean? for International Fight Week, I'm pretty sure people would not want to tune in into Joshua Van versus Asu Almabayev, or a Pyotr Yan versus a Merab Davishvili 3. Like, they would not be interested in seeing that. They would probably be interested in seeing a Khamzat Chimaev fight, going up to light heavyweight possibly. But then there's even the light heavyweight title fight between Yuri Prohashka and Carlos Ulberg. So it's very interesting to see what they're going to be doing over the next, I'd say, 3 to 4 weeks with fight announcements. But I'll try my best to keep you guys updated throughout the week. I guess I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.